Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, and good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday. Again. Oh, no. Monday, August 18th, 2025. Time to get ready once again for another show. A whole week of shows. Apparently, we're going to do the entire week thing again. And it's time to catch up on, well, all the things that happened over the weekend that were crazy. Plus, of course, all of the things that happened at the end of last week. It's time now to look back on the epic historic event that was Anchorage 2025. They tried to hang a label on it to make it seem more like an official sort of summit meeting. But by most accounts, everything that went on was something of an embarrassment. The whole thing sort of fell apart too. He had a whole day planned. I mean, a whole one-day summit, everybody, and yet. The reports are, and I saw the first reactions that I saw were being circulated online, taken directly from Fox News, which of course usually considers itself to be the Trump cheerleader. And I don't know, I guess they had to fire do they have a foreign affairs reporter? They've probably, I guess, are firing whoever gave the 1-star review to the proceedings and just pointing out that from their vantage point in the room, it appeared that, and they skipped all the pomp and circumstance, but that their vantage point in the room, it appeared that Putin strolled in, steamrollered Trump, said what it was he wanted to say, pointed at him a couple of times, and then left, like took off. That was the end of the summit, and no one knows exactly what got said because very little got said. And they had a whole thing planned out and a luncheon, and we know what was on the menu for the luncheon because they left. That plus all the other planning and logistics documents, including which leaders would be exactly where at exactly what times. I'm surprised they didn't put it out on Signal, but they left it on the printer at the business center in the hotel in Anchorage, where I guess the advanced team was staying. So that seemed nice. But they had a whole nice luncheon planned, and we know it was on the menu. Boring menu, by the way. That's another revealing item about Donald Trump. You know, it was like any country club lunch there could be. And also, but they had a nice dessert, a creme brulee for dessert, which honestly, dessert for lunch is one of his bigger problems in his life, but doesn't seem intent on addressing it. Anyway, mostly reviewed as an abject failure. And stage 2 of whatever international negotiations are going on today, Trump was only interested in the Putin part. And he literally had American service members on their hands and knees rolling out red carpet for Putin, which was embarrassing enough. And I saw all kinds of video also of Trump making his way down the carpet and just cannot stay centered and is weaving and bobbing all over the place. It was all very interesting, but all for naught. And now this week, more important happenings in Washington. Volodymyr? How do they even pronounce it in Ukrainian? President Zelensky is coming to meet with the guy who says he met with Putin to decide his fate, essentially. Only he's not coming alone. He's bringing a posse of European leaders with him. And people are beginning to talk about it in terms of it being a sort of intervention. I don't know if that's really a thing you can do with Donald Trump, but that among the many topics needing attention this morning. Greg Dworkin awaits. I'm going to go back to we were talking a little bit about this before the show. I may go back to the royalty-free stuff for today to play you in. And this sounds very nice. Grand. This has the word grand in it. Grand orchestra fanfare. Nice. A little timpani ending there, too. Very good. Greg Dworkin, ladies and gentlemen. How are you today, Greg? I don't know, because you're muted, I guess. Or, whatever. Okay. Greg, are you not there? What happened? Your plug fell out. Oh, dear.
Hi.
There you are. You're struggling with the button
if we're going to
today?
go back to kettle drums,
I'll play that
which
again.
I love,
Yeah.
then let's do Beethoven's Fifth or something,
Oh, yeah. He's dead. He can't sue me at all.
Yeah. Well, the orchestra can, because chances are modern people are playing
right.
the ancient stuff,
Well, they're pretty old now.
But
So
fair
maybe
use,
they
we'll
won't hear
comment on it, and therefore it'll be okay.
Yes, right. That was our discussion prior. You have a great a business plan for expansion of the reach of the show, I think. You've discovered, and we should have filmed you discovering it, I guess.
When I was playing the video game Clear Obscure, which I've mentioned on the show, they have great
like that
music.
fanfare.
And one of the things that I came across are various professional voice and musician style people reacting to it, because reaction videos are real big on YouTube.
Yeah.
Reasons I don't understand. I mean, I understand watching video game music, having professional musicians say, hey, this is really sweet. Look at that incredible voice. This is interesting. This is what they do with the pizzica. So they sort of explain stuff. And for some reason, YouTube's algorithm said, oh, you like reaction videos? Let me send you a bunch of youngish civilians who have never listened to Abbott and Costello or Rodney Dangerfield and watch them react in real time to this humor. And they play the clips of these classic comedians and laugh at it. And that's the entire video. And then they want you to monetize it by clicking on it and subscribing and doing all this stuff. And I'm thinking, all they're doing is watching a video and laughing. And somehow or other, that's supposed to be intriguing and interesting. And you're supposed to pay money.
My
next thought was, okay, fine. It turns out that before each of these comedy clips, they put a little thing up saying, this is fair use because we're commenting on it. And I'm thinking, when we play clips, which we're about to do, we're commenting on it, so we must cover fair use as well. But then my next thought, because, this chain of thinking often happens, flight of ideas, when you're manic. Okay. How do you reach the people who both make and watch these reaction videos to comedy shows? How do you get them to register to vote? And how do you get them to vote, to save democracy? This is not exactly what's on their mind when they're doing this stuff.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe that's it. We need to reconfigure the news so that it's not just you sitting there watching Walter Cronkite read you the news. It's us filming you watching Walter Cronkite reading you the news and the reaction videos. And everybody, here's a whole channel of Gen Z people reacting to the news. Hey, everybody, fascism is on the rise. Oh no, I don't like that. Smash the like button, not for fascism, but for his reaction to finding out that fascism was on the rise. Yeah.
Right. And then
there's something
of course that leads to the
thought.
We discussed this too. I can't remember which of us came up with this idea. We should do yesterday's show and we should react to it.
Yes.
And that way, right. We could say brilliant and pithy things like, I have a feeling I know what he's going to say, because it's just so logical. Of course, it leads you right there, right?
Yeah. But we got to have lingo we got to figure out who's our target audience.
I don't want you to think I've listened to this before. This is the first time I'm listening to yesterday's show, so I'm just reacting.
I didn't listen when I did it. That's for sure. But yeah, then we have to say things like, oh, snap, that guy who's me said a thing yesterday, which I still agree with, and yet it's the first time I've heard it. Oh my God, I had no idea. Well,
I could say with all honesty,
he's crazy.
I never listen to
like
David
that.
when I do the show. That's why I just talk right over him. It's just absolutely spontaneous.
Yeah,
so no idea what I was going to say, but it needs to somehow guessed.
So I don't know how the genre got started, and and there's lots of people doing it. I have seen a bunch of them for music, and at one point, I watched a couple of them. And it's interesting to see different people reacting to the same music, but like 4 or 5 minutes of interesting. And then you're like, all right, they've never heard it before. Oh, that's another thing too. Well, I don't understand why I listen to things if you've never heard anything.
Right.
Who are you? Why are you reviewing
comedy
music?
You don't know who Abbott and Costello is. What do you know about comedy if this is like the first time you ever heard of Rodney Dangerfield?
Yeah. But I do say it's brilliant of them somehow if it works and it's monetized. You've monetized watching TV. That's been the holy grail for me, I guess, for all my life. How come no one's paying me to watch TV? They're
So
watching.
let's do a reaction video. I would like you to play
Okay.
Ruben Gallego
I don't know who
responding
that
in
is.
Arizona
Yeah.
to an interview on Arizona local TV.
I've never heard of him.
You, who are representing a red district, you, who are considered a frontline Democrat, how do you respond to the fact that Zoran Mandani is running for mayor of New York City, something that has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with your district, but everybody's asking, so I want your reaction, and I'd like your reaction to his reaction.
Okay, I've never heard of either of these people. I don't even know what two people are doing sitting in a room facing each other. I've never seen anything like this.
Let's an interview. I never saw an interview.
Yo,
I know you don't watch interviews,
so
this is new for you.
Okay.
Final question before I let you go and let you get out of here. What about Mondani in the New York mayor's race? What is he? Does he have a message that you think it could resonate with folks? I mean, he's talking about cost of living. He's talking about freezing rent. He's talking about open government-run grocery stores. But it seems like the center left of the party.
Food desert areas, and only one per borough.
Right, that's true. Yeah. Oh, that's another feature of the reaction video. You stop it every once in a while and you say things like that.
Yeah.
That's how this is how it's fair use, everybody. Yo.
And then you apologize for stopping it because people really want to see the video, not your reaction.
Right. Yo, I'm sorry, everybody. Let me get back to the video. I know that's why you're here.
Go, like,
Ruben Gallego.
Yeah, I don't know why they're attacking him. I think it's stupid.
Yo, he's not even wearing a tie. All right, there. It was very young of me to say yo a couple of times. All right. So Ruben Gallego now explaining what he thinks. He's reacting. He's doing a reaction video.
A frontline person shows the Democratic Party how to react to Zoran Mandani and not run away from him.
Okay, all right. Let's actually hear it. Because that's why you all came. Hey, smash the like button. Don't forget to subscribe. Yeah,
you're doing it right. We'll see how it works.
Okay. When maybe we're not in 100% agreement, right? But he has some ideas that are clearly, attracting people. It's okay to say, I disagree with this, this, and this, but I agree with that. But the idea that we're just going to throw out people that are really bringing in new ideas to the fold, exciting people just because they're slightly to the right or to the left of us, I think is dumb. The problem with Democrats is that we have been shrinking our tent as much as possible to the point where there's not many people left. And that happens on the left side of our party, and also happens on the right side of the party. And we can't do that. That's not how we win, and certainly that's not how we put a winning coalition together.
Okay. Well, that does sound good. My reaction to that is he definitely said it was good. He said left. He said right. He said tent. So, that's a pretty good video.
Yeah. So he's a moderate. He's a centrist.
Well, all right. That was interesting just in terms of, the answer certainly could have been, what? New York City, like that. Like, why are you asking me about that?
Frankly, I didn't find his response as interesting as the question.
The fact that it got asked, yeah.
But the way he asked it, everything is framing, right? He didn't say, how do you respond to this New York City communist running for, he didn't say it like that. It's like, this interesting New York City guy has a lot of followers and interesting ideas. What do you think?
Yeah.
If that's the way that
that's better.
So-called neutral reporters are going to wind up responding to it, why is Hakeem Jeffries so afraid of endorsing him?
That's true. Or
Hakeem
just
Jeffries'
saying, I live
district
with him.
in Brooklyn went for Mamdani by large numbers. Like, what's he doing? Why?
Well, he's worried that this guy, who I've never heard of and is kind of local and is in Arizona, might say, hey, Hakeem Jeffries must be an angry black man because he's backing us.
Hakeem Jeffries
crazy
obviously is listening to
socialisms.
his constituents. That's the job of the minority leader.
Mm-hmm.
Who's telling him it's a problem? This is the part I don't get.
I don't know.
Is it the consultants who I'm beginning to really dislike, or is it the actual people running, and who are they and why? I know the people on Long Island are worried about it if you're a Democrat, the Tom Swazis of the world, but why?
The only thing I can think of is New York City and New York area politics in general, like a lot of big cities or populous areas, it's very complex and weird. New York City more so than anywhere else with its local, competing local Democratic Party clubs. And this one did that to the other one, and somebody did something else, and he rezoned my parking in 1989. And this stuff, it happens, and
Well, my reaction to reaction,
it gets in the way.
Smash that like button.
Yeah.
Is that
ding?
Is that
right.
Ding, ding, ding? Is New York City politics is calcified.
Yeah.
And you have to stop doing this like it's 1980.
Yes, and you need to be able to tell people who will lean on you. I mean, there really are seriously very, in very many cases, older, wealthy donors who've been a big supporter of yours, and they will tell you stuff like, I know he's popular, but like I said, he's so-and-so's protege, and that guy rezoned my father's drugstore in 1979 so that we couldn't get enough parking, and I fought him for years and years, and he was such a jerk, and then, I mean, it really works like that in some places. And
Andrew Cuomo, who is trying to rustle up money and support in the Hamptons yet again, because that's his base.
Well, that's where the money
has gone or went this weekend or whatever. And he says to that guy, yeah, my father was governor. Did he do that to you? Well, actually, now that you mention it, yes, he did.
Yeah, but he did it in a good way.
But but when I was governor, I made sure that the Republicans in the New York State legislature were ruling the roost,
Yes,
so vote for me and give me money.
Right. I don't know.
That's
it's
what I mean about calcified politics.
People.
What has that got to do with 2025 Trump, the price of rent in New York City and all the other and the price of eggs and that sort of thing, which is what people care about.
Yeah. I don't know. And I don't know why the reluctance to say, yeah, listen, there's still some very big differences between me and him, but he's speaking to things that are resonating with people because they're true and they've been true for us. We've always wanted affordability for working class New Yorkers. We may not even disagree that much on how to do it with housing, but we do on buses or whatever.
As the old commercial
what's wrong
goes.
with that?
You're saying the same thing I'm saying. You're just doing this with your hands.
Right.
Why don't you vote for? Why don't you think I'm charismatic?
Yeah. Well,
why do you think I'm young?
Well, I heard what
you're not.
What one of those guys was doing with his hands was the problem. Why he's back, I don't know, but he is, and we'll kind of have to get rid of him one more time. That we thought we cleaned it up in the primary, but I guess not.
I guess not. So this is a behind a paywall piece from Mark Elias.
Okay.
He has a newsletter called Democracy Docket.
Love democracy. Not docket so much, but
his title is it doesn't have a title because it's a newsletter. Oh. But the URL says the culture pendulum swings back left. So that must have been what he meant to be for the title.
Yeah,
August 16th, 2025. So it came out a couple of days ago. On Wednesday, that would be Wednesday of last week, Joe Rogan shed his MAGA cape and dug into Anna Paulina Luna over ICE raids. That's capital ICE. The conservative podcaster who once yucked it up with Trump for 3 hours.
Puked it up. Yeah.
Puked it up. We'll get to puke in a minute. Who yucked it up with Trump for 3 hours was now concerned about the administration's immigration policies. He told Luna, when people thought about ICE, they thought, great, we're going to get rid of the gang members. They didn't think, great, you're going to get rid of the landscaper. Now, Rogan has been on this anti-ICE trip for a couple of months now.
Arrest him.
And that's why I and at the same time Mark Elias thought it was so interesting. Something in the culture, Mark Elias writes, has changed. And if you believe, as the right-wing provocateur Andrew Breitbart did, that politics is downstream from culture, this is a very big deal for the future of politics. And then he goes back and traces the Bill Clinton 1992 Arsenio Hall show playing the saxophone when he was at a low. 8 years of President Ronald Reagan and 4 years of President H.W. Bush before him. This was a refreshing change of pace, and he went on to, show that it was cool to be a Democrat. So politics and culture go hand in hand. 80s conservatism was a reaction to the counterculture of the 60s and 70s. 90s liberalism was a reaction to the 80s, et cetera, et cetera. But then we entered the W era of politics. And Stephen Colbert roasted Bush at the White House. Everything was good. West Wing was prominent. It was still cool to be a Democrat, even if Bush beat John Kerry. And when Obama won, Democrats were undeniably in control of culture and politics. I mean, they ran the Kennedy Center, for goodness sake.
Yes, and it was just the regular Kennedy Center the whole time.
Right. So Trump's held office for less than 5 years, but he's been on the political scene for much longer, and the culture has turned conservative to the point where even entertainers lost the ability and will to fight back. And people on the left grow so exhausted that the jokes weren't funny anymore. But that was then, this is now. While it might seem counterintuitive, Trump's return to the White House might have snapped something back in place. People are really angry. And with democracy so clearly and openly under threat, the country's starting to wake up a little bit. And while it might have taken 16 years, it seems like he finally figured out how to land a real punch against Trump. He's not only mentioning South Park, he's mentioning the manosphere shifting, Elon Dodge dumpster fire, the ICE thing, riling up people like Joe Rogan. And you might even add, and I'm not a fan. I don't really especially love him all that much. If you're a basketball fan, you remember Pat Riley and his look when he was coaching the LA and New York Knicks teams. So Gavin Newsom, the San Francisco Pat Riley, some people call him, because that's what he looks like.
Okay. Yeah.
And not a charismatic figure. Nonetheless, has an excellent online social media team. And he's taken to attacking Trump in Trumpian terms.
Yes, I feel like
saying and writing stupid things that gets tons of clicks and so on and so forth. It's working. It's getting under Trump's skin. And although Gavin Newsom is not necessarily popular nationwide, or so say the polls, nonetheless, he's rising in the, well, what if he runs for president, way too early speculation.
Sure.
And the point is that, in line with what Mark Elias is saying, is that people are angry and they want somebody who fights back, not just somebody who sits around and says, I'm going to write a sternly worded letter, which is, of course, the knock against Chuck Schumer. So what Elias writes is the GOP can feel the temperature in the room changing. That's why they're redistricting. That's why they're trying to suppress votes. It's cool to be a Democrat again, and the proof will be in the midterms. And it's got nothing to do, by the way, he doesn't write that, I'm saying this, with whether or not Democrats are, quote, popular, and, quote, when you ask, what do you think of the party? When you say and answer those polls, you're talking about your perception of who are the leaders of the party. And, of course, there aren't any leaders because they're out of power. So, of course, you're going to be unhappy with the party because they lost. That has nothing to do with how you're going to vote.
Right. And then, of course, people separate it from, well, look, I don't love the way they do X, Y, Z, but what am I going to do? Vote for the MAGA weirdos? No, of course not. That's what I'm all about opposing.
And so here are the numbers that really
Actually,
matter.
They know how to answer about what to think about Mamdani all the way from Arizona. I don't agree with everything, but I'm not going to, not going to vote for Sliwa.
Right. And that's the correct answer. So Polling USA posts this. This is an RMG poll. It's a Republican-leaning poll. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Ronald Reagan's famous question.
Right.
No, 52. Yes, 43.
See.
For the party in power, those are not good numbers.
No.
Here's some other not good numbers.
Else too.
You know how Trump is cosplaying, running the police department in D.C., except he really doesn't because the judge said you can't.
Mm-hmm.
But he does have the military there because he can call them National Guard if he wants to. So Washington Post, WUSA 9, which is a D.C.-based TV station owned by Gannett, who also probably owns your local paper if you still have one.
My local paper. Washington Post. But anyway, yes, right. It's a CBS affiliate. Or is CBS it WUSA is ABC? I think so.
CBS, WUSA.
Is it? Okay.
Channel 9.
What am I thinking? Oh, JLA is the ABC. Go ahead.
They share a channel, apparently.
Oh, what? How?
So it says that in their write-up, as to who they are. So maybe sometimes it looks like it's ABC, and maybe sometimes it looks like CBS, depending upon who's on the air at that time. Jordan Fisher writes, reservations at D.C. restaurants dropped 16% year over year to the day Trump announced his police takeover. The next day, 27%. By day 3, They're down 31%. It couldn't come at a worse time. DC Summer Restaurant Week starts today.
Oh, yes. Well, Trump doesn't go to restaurants. He used to only go to the one that was in his hotel, but he sold that. So I guess he just goes to the ketchup aisle in a supermarket.
Right. The administration has credited the surge in law enforcement with hundreds of arrests, but he's actually ruining local business, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, well, it sucks to go someplace and see the army all over.
How do things change that all of a sudden, it's maybe Trump isn't so popular? Maybe, saying I'm for Trump isn't so popular. Here's another one, Rolling Stone. Rising food prices are likely to continue thanks to Trump's trade wars. That doesn't sound fawning to me. Wholesale prices on fresh and dry vegetables rose nearly 40%, and soon consumers will feel the pinch because they're talking about wholesale prices. Once the wholesale prices rise, then you start seeing it retail.
Right.
And if you are talking about producer price index, if you're talking about wholesale pricing, and you turn around and say, well, I haven't seen it in my store, therefore there's no impact. I don't know what you're saying.
Not retail.
Some things happen first before other things happen later.
Right. For all of you who understand, at least, I guess this is really something people who don't believe that tariffs get passed along to the consumer would say, but I don't know how you miss that.
Well, you can justify that until the price of tariffs are actually passed along to consumers.
And then,
while that hasn't happened yet, you can claim all this nonsense. But, reality has a liberal bias, and it's going to catch up with you.
All right. Well, I guess that's happening. And it's almost, maybe restaurant business will pick up as it becomes just as expensive to shop for food as it is to go to restaurants. But then eventually restaurants will realize it costs us more money to buy these ingredients too. Unless they start serving sawdust.
Smash that like button.
Yes, right. Well, everybody, let's get together and we'll review this commercial break when we get back. I've never heard this before, and actually I haven't, but you all have.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. How was the commercial? Your reaction, Greg Dworkin? I don't know.
Well, I didn't hear it because the way this is set up is I don't hear what plays on
you
the
didn't
podcast.
Hear it,
I just
so
hear
that
music.
Means you're ready for this new video I'm about to make where you hear it for the first time. And then you our first video is being completely unprepared. And then we say, that's because we've heard it for the first time.
So now for something completely different.
All right. News.
We're going to talk about the big story of the day.
Good. And
which is the failed Friday summit. And because it happened Friday night, we haven't had a reaction to it.
Right. First time reacting, everybody.
The upcoming Neville Chamberlain meeting, which happens today, where Trump meets with Zelensky and explains that he's going to give Hitler the Sudetenland.
Yeah, basically. I assume that the whole plan was he'll tell him, I'm giving Putin whatever he wants, but you have to knuckle under. He's been talking about this for days now. There's going to be a land swap. Because it's a real estate
we give Ukrainian land to Russia, and I get Trump Tower.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
that's
pretty
the swap.
Simple.
Exactly. I don't think there's any proposal to give land to Ukraine. There's no swap per se.
Right. Zelensky's going to say that's a bad idea, and as Phillips O'Brien, the military analyst, points out, the question's going to be how Europe reacts. And here's what's so interesting. Let's start with the summit itself.
All right.
That was Friday night. It was awful.
It was Friday
I was watching
morning.
ABC News Live,
and
their correspondents, including the very experienced Martha Raddatz, were just speechless. They didn't know what to say. The lead up was, we don't know what's going to happen, but Trump has led us to believe, and my immediate first thought is, Trump told you something. Why do you believe this liar? Well, he's led us to believe that if it wasn't going anywhere and he didn't have a ceasefire deal, he would end the summit in 2 minutes. He told us that, said the reporters. And this thing's been going on for 3 hours. Therefore, we have to assume something is coming out of this. And I'm thinking to myself, look, Trump is a liar. Why are you believing him? There's no evidence whatsoever something's coming out of this. And certainly not the fact that Trump told you something. Whatever he tells you, I don't know why you don't get this after 5 years. You cannot believe what he tells you or any of his staff. Well, we have it on reliable sources. There are no reliable sources.
That's true.
Everything they tell you is a lie. They lie to your face all the time. And guess what happened? Trump came out. Putin made a statement about stuff, about how important Alaska was in history. And Trump, by the way, kept referring to Alaska as being in Russia. And when I leave Alaska, I'll get back to the United States, which I'm sure made Alaskans happy.
Well,
and then Trump makes a statement saying we made progress, and I'm not going to tell you what it is, and that's the end of the conference. And that's what he said. And then the reporters are saying, wait a minute, what he said doesn't make any sense. That doesn't comport at all with what we just told you was going to happen. What is he? What's going on here? And so, how should we respond to the reaction? Borowitz probably had the best reaction to it. The Borowitz report had a piece today. Sarah Palin, no longer dumbest person to set foot in Alaska.
Seems fair.
Her tenure as the dumbest person to set foot in the state of Alaska came to an abrupt end Friday. Speaking to reporters, the former governor was philosophical about losing her crown of idiocy, declaring, I had a good run. Yeah. Watching the newly minted king of stupid ramble incoherently at a press conference in Anchorage, Palin observed, wait, whoa, that is a moron.
Yeah, it was a review
Even
video.
I know the difference between Alaska and Russia, she said.
She did.
Yeah, she did.
That's true.
And then I'm going to read you something from the Daily Mail.
Oh.
And I promise you, this isn't Borowitz. This is like a serious, well,
it's the
Boris Johnson wrote it, so I don't know if I can say it seriously.
Boris Johnson.
But Boris Johnson wrote
alive?
an op-ed. Let me give you the title. The title, Boris Johnson. It's the most vomit-inducing episode in all the tawdry history of international diplomacy, but it will have taught Trump this vital lesson. That's the title of the piece.
Redemption story.
Right. That was just about the most vomit-inducing episode in all the tawdry history of international diplomacy. It made the gorge rise to see Putin welcomed onto American soil. It was emetic to see him applauded on the red carpet. It was nauseating to watch his Gollum-like smirk as he became one of the only... I don't think that Boris Johnson likes Putin very much. Became one of the only world leaders I can think of to be invited to ride in the back of the presidential limo.
Yes.
It was chunderous to hear him given an American platform for his lies about the causes of war in Ukraine, a country that in 2014, when he first attacked it, posed no threat whatsoever to Russia. As I listened to the unctuous and wearisome predictability with which he tried both to flatter and discreetly humiliate Trump, I wanted to gag. I bet you did too. And most of us aren't even Ukrainian. Wretch.
Yes. Wow.
Well, you know,
it's a thesaurus.
So how did you really feel, Boris?
That's one of the big differences between him and Trump. He's certainly well spoken and has a vocabulary. That was pretty amazing. And yeah, there were some huge protocol errors besides leaving the schedule on the printer. But yeah, no foreign anybody, no former KGB agents ride in the back of the presidential limousine.
Right.
Who knows what happened. I would say, ordinarily I'd say, well, now you got to sweep that for bugs, which they were going to do anyway. But
that's like going to Europe or Saudi Arabia and bowing to royalty. You don't do that.
Like he did do that. But I mean, it was kind of crazy. And if it wasn't for the fact that he was already giving away all the secrets, I would worry about what happened in there. There was also
under the title of historic embarrassment, Rolling Stone title, Rubio desperately tries to spin Trump's Putin flop. The president said he'd be unhappy if he walked away from his meeting with the Russian leader without a ceasefire agreement, which is exactly what happened. Then Rubio went on the TV shows on Sunday, the full Ginsburg, I think he did, to try to explain and justify the lack of progress.
Yeah.
And Martha Raddatz, one of the people who was stunned at the press conference, said the fighting hasn't stopped, the killing hasn't stopped, and there's no ceasefire. What changed President Trump's mind? I don't think his mind has changed at all, Rubio said. If the whole effort doesn't work out, then there's going to have to be additional consequences, but we're trying to avoid that by reaching a peace agreement. In other words, Trump said there'll be consequences if I don't get a ceasefire. He didn't get a ceasefire, and Trump said, I'm canceling all the consequences.
Well, there were consequences. I just also
and there was
canceled
progress.
them.
And Rubio refused to elaborate on what progress was.
Right.
Raddatz pressed Rubio. The president went in that meeting saying he wanted a ceasefire, there'd be consequences. And then they didn't agree to a ceasefire. Where are the consequences? And Rubio said, that's not the aim. The president said that was the aim, Raddatz said. And Rubio didn't know what to say. And basically said, and when Raddatz or somebody else, I don't know if it was her because it's not in this particular article, said to him, well, what's the progress? And Rubio basically said, you're not going to know that.
Yeah. Well, Trump said that, right? We made progress, but I'm not going to tell you what it is.
Yeah.
Wow.
The Atlantic, Jonathan Lamar. Well, what did you think would happen? That's the title of the piece.
No. Okay. Yikes.
Trump rolled out the red carpet for Putin, but failed to make a deal. What did you think was going to happen? Trump emerged today from a summit with Russia's Vladimir Putin without a deal and without much to say. When he stood next to Putin, Trump offered few details. Stunningly, for a president who loves a press conference, he took no questions. In his brief remarks, he conceded that he and Putin had not reached a deal to even pause the fighting, let alone end the fighting. We didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there. If anything, Putin seemed to make clear his demands regarding Ukraine haven't changed. As Putin and Trump boarded their respective airplanes, Ukraine and Europe were left guessing as to what the coming days would bring. What it's bringing is Trump invited Zelensky to the White House, which is happening today, and Zelensky said, great, I'm bringing my buddies with me.
Yeah, all of Europe.
List of those buddies in just a minute. Yeah. Phillips O'Brien looking at this saying, as the meeting in Washington approaches and Trump is trying to pressure Zelensky to give land to Putin, I do hope one thing is clear. Trump was, is, and always will be in Putin's camp. Everything we've seen since November was an act to help Putin. Trump has always wanted to screw Ukraine, and the impression is he's going to do it. Earlier, he had said, we're approaching arguably the geopolitically defining moment of the war. Trump has admitted he's cooking up a plan with Ukraine ceding territory to Russia. Ukraine will want to reject it, and then European states will have to step up and be counted. It looks very likely that the moment in question will come tomorrow, which is today. Ukraine will reject the transfer, and then Europe either will or will not stand up and be counted. So who's coming? British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Zelensky, of course, from Ukraine. Von der Leyen from European Union. Merz from Germany. Macron from France. Stubb from Finland.
Oh.
Very much affected by all of this.
Yeah.
Meloni from Italy canceled her vacation. She's coming.
Oh, wow.
And Mark Rutte, who I think is the NATO
yes,
top
that's
diplomat.
right. I believe that's correct. I remember that guy.
And so they're all going to be there. So I don't know if they're there to basically stop Trump from being rude to Zelensky.
Maybe.
I don't know what they're going to have to say about it, but it's going to be interesting.
I don't know how that happens. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you can stop him from being rude to anybody, but yeah, they're there so that he can't just berate Zelensky all the time. Somebody else can think of something to say to butt in, I guess, and put an end to it. Yeah, all the protocol went out the window because, and this is why I guess I thought it might be possible that there would be a deal announced. Was I thought Putin had decided what deal he wanted and had told Trump, announce this deal. That's what I thought that Trump was going to do. And he didn't do it. And I don't think it's because Trump said, no, I'm not going to announce that as a deal. I think Putin didn't propose anything to him and had no interest in a deal. And maybe Trump thought he would bring it with him as, talking points or something.
Right. Now, but Poland, interesting player here.
Yes.
Well, the prime minister of Poland is Donald Tusk,
yes.
who's definitely Eurocentric and Europe leaning.
Okay. Yes.
But the president is Karol Nawrocki, recently elected and more Russia leaning.
Oh.
So Trump had a group call, or at least an individual call, but I think it was a group call, where he explained what happened at the summit. And all the people that I mentioned were on that call. The one leader is missing, writes Jorge Librero. The one leader that was missing was Donald Tusk, because Trump insisted that Polish President Karol Nawrocki be on the call.
I see.
And the White House requested that specifically. It was embarrassing for Tusk, who later joined the call.
Oh, all right.
But according to that, Poland will be represented in the White House by their foreign minister. Apparently, Trump just doesn't like Tusk because Tusk openly doesn't like Trump.
I thought that
so the foreign minister is going to be there representing them, and that'll be interesting. But in any case, so Poland will be there as well, and will be very interesting to see what comes out of that.
Yeah,
but that's the big news for today, and we don't know what's going to happen. And unlike the summit on Friday, this one actually is meaningful.
I guess so, and they'll probably being back in Washington, maybe have a little more control over the protocol. The other thing people know, the summit watchers, people who understand the protocol of these things, were, one, they lost their minds when they saw Putin, first of all, get a red carpet which
is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And former military people were aghast.
And having military members
like
on
Boris
their hands
Johnson.
and knees rolling the thing out, was crazy. Then getting into the limo with Trump, no, that doesn't happen either. And then third, the press conference. Ordinarily, the host country's representation, the head of state at these negotiations, opens the press conference. And then, he'll open it to questions and discussion for the visiting dignitaries. And Putin came in as though it was his press conference, said his piece, and then left. And Trump said, I don't know. They had a handshake, by the way. I don't know how they get these photos. Every time he shakes Putin's hand, for as excited as he is to see Putin, I don't know why they can't get a picture of him looking happy or decent at these. He always looks like he's just literally been beaten up by Putin. Is the worst, schlubbiest pictures you've ever seen. Because he has been, I guess.
I mean, it'd be irresponsible not to speculate, but everybody assumes that when Putin got into the beast with Trump, he simply said, "Remember the compromise?" And that was it.
Yeah, I guess so. And I guess that makes Trump sort of nauseous, maybe. That's the look on his face of just dumbfounded, like he's come out of anesthesia after talking to, I don't know, fine, whatever. And so today, I'm sure, he'll have his team in place. He's not all the way out in Alaska, and they'll be working on trying to make him look tough, but it's going to look like he's a petulant baby if he tries to stomp all over half a dozen world leaders all at the same time. I think that's the plan for them.
One thing that supposedly came out of this meeting is, again, I have to emphasize, if Trump says something, you can't believe him because he's a liar.
Yes.
Right? He's an inaccurate discussant of things said to him and things that he believes. He lies.
Yeah.
He lies like a rug. Okay. So Trump said, it was interesting because Putin told me he thought that mail-in ballots are the whole reason that I lost the 2020 election, and mail-in ballots are terrible and we have to get rid of them.
He's not saying anything about that.
Fiona Hill, who is a Russian expert, said actually mail-in ballots are used all the time in Russia, and no, he probably didn't say that.
No, he almost certainly. If he said it, it was a calculated. I need to. Mr. President, you are so right, something. But no, I don't think Putin wasted his time on any of those things. Trump, my feeling, I saw two such videos. He also said something, I forget what the other stupid thing was, but, Putin very definitely said to me some element of my own stump speech. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sure, right.
That's what Trump had no idea what
and then
he
asked me to sign. He said something to me and then asked me to sign it. He wanted me to sign his words in the air.
Pretty much. I think Trump may have had little to no idea what Putin was saying. It may be very well that he came in and said it in Russian.
Spoke in Russian.
Yeah, and then they had no translator, or it was Putin's own translator who just said, "Mr. President," he says, "You are very nice." Yeah. And so he just repeats his stump speech instead. This is what he said. These are the only words I know.
Social post that Trump put out this morning, which I think is significant based on.
Oh my God, what are you doing to me? Look at this. It's huge.
Yeah. I am going to lead a movement to get rid of mail-in ballots, capitalized. And also, while we're at it, highly inaccurate, very expensive, and seriously controversial voting machines, which cost 10 times more than accurate and sophisticated watermark paper, which is faster and leaves no doubt.
It's not going to be faster.
Right? Give me the paper. I'll count it. He who counts the votes.
Yeah. I'm done. I won. See how fast that is? Okay.
Elections can never be honest with mail-in ballots voting. And everybody, in particular, the Democrats, knows this. I and the Republican Party will fight like hell to bring honesty and integrity back to our elections. I hope he continues to tell people not to vote mail-in because his people will listen and nobody else will. I think it's a great idea.
Okay.
But nonetheless,
so long as we're allowed
what I'm saying is he's going all in on getting rid of mail-in ballots.
I guess so.
The stuff that he made up about what Putin said is stuff that he is going with.
Okay, at least this week.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's really all. That was the only thing I could guess was he didn't know or remember or understand what Putin said, and he needed to fill TV time because he was talking to Sean Hannity about it. Sean Hannity had an afternoon interview with him. Tell us about the World Historic Summit. And there was nothing to say because he didn't know what happened, so he just said, I guess Putin mostly just said exactly what I say in my speeches. Sure. Then what was the point of getting together and having I don't know. Don't ask me stupid questions like that.
Well, my takeaway from the weekend, pending the actual discussion between Europe and Trump as to what's going on here, is that so far Trump is losing Joe Rogan and Boris Johnson. So what's going on?
He's gaining Laura Loomer, however. So
I think he already had.
Yes. Well, she was mad at him for a brief moment about, those Epstein files, which we're totally not being distracted from. And but has gotten back on his side about something else. Yes, right. She got mad over the weekend about humanitarian visas that had been issued to mostly children in Gaza to come to the United States for medical treatment. And she said, "What? Don't you remember we're racists?" Oh yeah.
Good morning, Dearborn, Michigan. Are you reconsidering your vote?
Yeah. Well, no, Trump is better on this. He will be, or he is now. I'm not certain which. We should do reaction videos, and they can say, I never paid any attention to U.S. politics. How do you react to this video of yourself endorsing Trump? What? Yeah. So that's what she spent the weekend doing. Of course, the occupation of Washington, D.C. continues apace. I've begun noticing the very weird similarities in modes of dress and activity between, interestingly enough, since we're talking about Gaza, between the armed forces patrolling the street although the armed forces patrolling the street are just bored and walking in circles. The federal law enforcement patrolling the street have decided to get into the action and jump on people and arrest them. But they outfit themselves, as it happens, very much like what Hamas looks like when they're patrolling the streets of Gaza. But remember, those masked armed men are bad. These are our good masked armed men disappearing our citizens and friends and neighbors, even non-citizens. But by the way, jumping everybody pretty much. And the new mode is, we jump you and ship you to Texas, and then if you're a citizen, you can tell us, and we'll see if after about 3 weeks we'll let you go. So that's been a big activity this weekend. And I don't know. There's a few others too, by the way. Some weird ones I can't quite explain. Ed Martin the pardon, and now the pardon attorney for the United States, but also has been assigned the special task by Pam Bondi of fighting against weaponization of the DOJ by weaponizing the DOJ to fight the people that he suspects in the past have weaponized the DOJ. It's kind of a reaction video for the DOJ. Okay. And anyway, he apparently caught on the street.
Ed Martin should get on the air and say, before I explain what I'm doing, smash that like button.
Right. So he was caught on the street by neighbors, essentially, lingering out. Well, I'll put it to you this way. He was found loitering outside of Letitia James's house in a trench coat in the middle of August. And a neighbor approached him and said, "Hi, what are you doing here? Who are you guys?" It was him and another guy in a suit and tie. But Martin in a trench coat in 85, 90 degree weather and drinking coffee. And unable to explain, he wouldn't identify himself. And the person who found him didn't know who he was specifically, but was basically like, "Are you guys federal officers hanging out outside of Letitia James's house for some strange reason?" "Oh, no, we're just looking at nice houses. We're just admiring the homes here. Oh, it's beautiful. Look at the architecture." And she's like, "It's a tract house. There's nothing historic about it. Move along. You know, you're here because of who lives here, and I know that, and why won't you admit it?" And then, then it was identified. It was Ed Martin in one of those pervert trench coats, that the flashers use all the time. And that's clearly what they're called. And so we're not really sure why that's happening.
That's a good time for me to end my segment, I think.
You think? Okay.
But although I started it with Zoran Mamdani, I'm going to end it with Zoran Mamdani. This is Michael Lang, the breakout news reporter, mentioning, I'll tell you one blessing in disguise. I think Mamdani's 33 years old.
Oh, well, congratulations. That's very young. Good.
He's too young to run for president. So Mamdani mania, whatever it is, this is the first mayor of New York City without national ambitions in 30 years.
Oh.
He can't have national ambitions. He's not old enough.
Well, how long is the term of a New York mayor?
Well, it's about 15 minutes of a honeymoon, and it's 4 years worth of arguing.
I mean, I guess that's an interesting point to make. Although I assume that by the time
not sure he's going to be old enough by 2028, maybe just.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's not 2028.
Like I'm not old enough while I'm running, but after I win, I will be.
Yes. I don't have a great deal of. Well, also
he's not running. I mean, it's not an issue. It's just
wasn't he born
refreshing
in Uganda?
To a lot of New Yorkers to have somebody who pay attention to the city.
Yes, and that's really nice too. Yeah, and what we ought to be talking about. And I don't know. First of all, we got to get off the notion of anybody who has any modicum of success now by exciting somebody in the Democratic Party. Well, what if they run for president? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
New York City mayors don't run for higher office very often and win. They run for higher office on occasion. They just about never win. That's the deal.
Yeah, I mean, it's still just a mayoralty. And also, I mean, okay, let's say he was 63 years old. Did we forget that? I thought everybody was freaking out because he was born in Uganda. You know how that goes with presidencies? Doesn't work.
Yeah.
So don't worry about it. But I guess, better point was, like you said, well, that guy, his father killed the previous president. Didn't you listen to the current president? I watched him review a video of that. I don't know why everybody is worried about it. Not everybody who excites Democrats instantly has to be put forward as a presidential candidate. But it is a nice point that you will have somebody who seems to be focused on governing New York City, working on things. It's not that he wouldn't be governor one day. I don't know. But in the meantime, right now, he's eating at food trucks. That's cool. Don't worry about it. If he also wants to be governor, that'll be good, too. If you're worried about him being president, one, I don't know why you're worried about it. Two, he was born in Uganda. Forget it. So just enjoy it, I guess.
Now, I should mention, Jamie Dupre points out something from the Donald Trump Truth Social post about mail-in ballots.
Okay.
He says he's going to sign an executive order
Oh.
to help bring honesty to the 2026 midterm election. They must do what the federal government tells them. That's, of course, unconstitutional. It's up to the states to decide how they vote. Feds have nothing to do with it. But that's of interest. And the last point before we hit the music says it's time to go section of this broadcast,
Still have a minute.
Of this reaction video.
Yeah.
MSNBC announced this morning it's changing its name to MS Now. MS
It is.
News,
MS
Opinion,
Now.
and the World.
Ms.
MS
Now.
So it's changing, and the media landscape is changing, and maybe MS Now will just do like 24 hours of reaction videos.
I hope so. MS Now. I guess that's probably they probably. I wonder if they think they're
from
fooling
NBC.
Trump.
In other words, NBC will not be part of their logo anymore.
Yeah.
No Peacock, and no NBC is part of the name.
That ought to fool Trump. I mean, maybe I assume that's what it is. I don't know whether it's probably half and half. Trump wants us to get rid of it because he hates NBC, but also if we change it to something else, he'll be bamboozled by it. But I think the MS will probably remind him of it, unless he thinks it's Mississippi now. Now this is Mississippi.
Right.
They should have changed that little flag to a Confederate one.
Oh, by the way, there's a picture of Zelensky getting off the plane.
Oh, welcome.
No red carpet, no suit. He's wearing his
right.
His fatigues that he always wears.
Sort of, yeah.
So upset about it. I think the reason he's bringing his friends is so that Trump doesn't lose it.
They're wearing a suit for me, sir.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, this will be a very interesting day. We'll have a day to digest it, too, because tomorrow's Tuesday, and, we don't do the thing where you come in on Tuesday, unless, of course, it's a special bulletin. You're certainly welcome to do it if something momentous happens. Otherwise, I hope, Greg, you'll spend the day hitting the like button and subscribing to our review videos. I appreciate that you have stumbled into that genre. It's really rather remarkable. Okay. Well, we'll keep an eye on the summit. They do meet today. There'll be a day for reaction and digestion, and we'll see you on Wednesday. I'll review those things. All right. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I want to return to the subject of weirdo Ed Martin hanging out outside of Letitia James's house. To remind you, in case if you missed Friday's episode or you were glued to the television waiting for the summit to begin and then found out it was over before it started, you might have missed our discussion on Friday, I think, that the special remit to Ed Martin having been rejected in his nomination for U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C., now that role being filled by Jeanine Pirro, of all people. It actually got worse. Anyway, Ed Martin's new special job, one, he's the pardon attorney, and like Marco Rubio, he has 15 jobs in the Justice Department. One is being an insurrectionist from January 6th and showing up in the Department of Justice like several Justice employees these days. But he is in charge of combating what they claim was Democratic and Biden-led in particular, but also Barack Obama, the Democratic weaponization of the DOJ. And the way they're going to fight the weaponization of the DOJ is to put special prosecutors outside of the house of, among others, Letitia James, but there are several. They're charging Jack Smith, the special counsel who was assigned the task of investigating Trump on so many fronts, both civil and criminal, and having to do with January 6th, having to do with Russia, having to do with manipulation of the elections in 2016 and 2020, and attempts to do the same, attempts to forge electoral college votes, a little bit of everything. And then, of course, making off with nuclear secrets from the White House and stashing them in the bathroom of Per-Volago. A couple of problems. And Letitia James, of course, prosecuting him for fraud in New York State. and succeeding in that and getting a civil liability verdict against him. And the claim here with Letitia James, again, if you missed things on Friday, we'll long story short this, it is the aim of Pam Bondi and Ed Martin to fashion a criminal complaint against Letitia James for the crime of violating the civil rights of Donald J. Trump by finding him liable for fraud in civil court. You have persuaded a jury to hold me responsible for fraud and fine me several $100 million as a result. Well, those several $100 million belong to me, and you're taking them from me through the use of the courts. So A, that's obviously the weaponization of the courts, and B, obviously a violation of my civil rights. I have I have a right to keep this money. You using the court system by finding me civilly liable in a court of law are violating those rights and now taking my money. That's the actual theory that's going on here. It's actually quite insane. And I guess to take it to the next level of insanity, Ed Martin has, as I said, dressed up as a flasher pervert and is hanging out for some strange reason outside of Letitia James's house in New York. Now, the cover story for why that's happening, as opposed to the cover story for why armed federal agents showed up outside of Gavin Newsom's press conference the other day, or why armed federal agents and members of the U.S. military and activated forces of the National Guard of states with red Republican governors now being dispatched to D.C., and why they're showing up and doing things like blockading traffic around the city, right? Greg was telling you how much the restaurant business has dropped off. A lot of the reason the restaurant business dropped off, well, one, if you're trying to have maybe a nice, pleasant outdoor dining experience while the weather was relatively mild, and your view is ruined by people being beaten in the streets because the Bureau of Prisons guys have showed up and put on masks, not unlike what you might find on the streets of Gaza, whether it's because you're speaking to or being confronted by a Hamas fighter or by a ultra-conservative Muslim woman in face veil, etc. Whatever, that'll drive them crazy to be compared to that. But masked agents stopping cars, pulling people out of cars, beating them while they're arresting them. And even if you're not seeing that, then you're just seeing bored National Guardsmen walking up and down the street. And in some of the nicer restaurant areas, that's pretty much what you're seeing. There's not much going on at all there. There was never any crime emergency, certainly not there. And so you're seeing bored soldiers walk up and down the street, or riding up and down the streets in very noisy military-style vehicles. That's going to ruin your evening. But even if it doesn't, let's say you're a military enthusiast, or you're Donald Trump and or you're a Trumpy, Donald Trump would never go out to a restaurant, but Trumpy weirdos are going out to restaurants owned by Trumpy people or that have become havens for Trumpy people. They get thrown out of or stared at, looked at funny in every other restaurant. So they all go to either Don Jr.'s Club, the executive branch, or that weirdo restaurant Butterworth's that I think we've mentioned once or twice on the air. That's sort of the hangout for the young-ish Republican Trumpy crowd, that where they have parties that, we need to look like Barbies and it's cool to look like Barbies. And so we're going to have parties for Barbie people and make fun of people who don't look like Barbie and get together and do that. Except we all look like, instead of looking like Barbie, we all end up looking like Kim Guilfoyle with weird plastic surgery, or Kristi Noem like she does every press conference in drag these days. I don't know if you've noticed that. The hair extensions and the wild makeup. Now, people have been saying to me, no, that's not fair. That's not drag. She's a woman, and women, if they're going to be in drag, would be dressing like men, presumably. But of course, the genders are fluid these days, so you never know. But I just thought of drag in terms of the crazy wigs and over-the-top makeup, and I think that what Kristi Noem is doing qualifies under those standards. But yeah, one of the reasons that the number of reservations in DC restaurants have dropped off is you can't get to the restaurant because some of these major arteries are blocked with checkpoints. I don't know if that's what's going on now, but I did see a few minutes ago that Charlie Savage was asking, hey, why is in the middle of Monday morning, not really necessarily commuting hour, but, busy time traffic-wise, why is the Key Bridge into D.C.? It ends in, it goes from Virginia across the Potomac to lands in Georgetown, the Key Bridge. Why is it closed? What's happening here? Is there a checkpoint going on, or is there an accident? Nobody knows. Anyway, so all sorts of crazy things happening in Washington, D.C., and, of course, in New York. And the other element, by the way, of the harassment of Letitia James. How did we get back to the restaurants? I forget what the segue was there. Never mind. Anyway, Letitia James, in addition to being accused of violating Donald Trump's civil rights by, prosecuting him, not for a criminal case, but in her case, a civil charge, the DOJ has assigned to Ed Martin an investigation into a mortgage that she took out at some point, saying it itself was fraudulent. Then I guess this is their idea of a funny joke. I don't know whether there's anything really serious to it. She says no, but I think that they think it's funny and trolling to say, well, okay, Letitia James, you're going to prosecute Donald Trump and the Trump Organization for mortgage fraud by misstating the value of their properties and getting sweetheart deals on loans as a result. We think you might have lied on your application for a mortgage for properties that you own. And so we're going to investigate it. And I guess now the excuse for Ed Martin turning up in a pervert coat outside of her house is, I'm looking to see if I can figure out the mortgage, I guess, on this house. He's just going to look at the house and say, oh, yeah, it's got windows and everything. It's probably fraud here. And that's what we're going to do. So there was a woman who confronted him on the street, and I don't think she realized that it was Ed Martin, but she was pretty sure. And what an eagle eye, honestly. She just found it weird that two guys in suits and one in a pervert coat were standing around looking at Letitia James's house and nothing else, and came out and confronted them and just basically tried to get them to say who they were and why they were there. And they tried mightily to pretend that they were just passersby. And I mean, it may be that Ed Martin thought he would get away with it because he doesn't think of his trench coat as a pervert flasher coat, which it is, but rather as a secret agent coat. Now, he should have had a hat if that was the case, but he was just doing the straight up pervert thing, and he didn't need the spy hat. But these guys really thought they were being super clever, telling people, I'm just admiring this house. And she's pointing out there's nothing special about this house. They were all developed by the same developer. Well, would you call this this was interesting. Whoever he was with says, is this a stoop? Is this what you would call a stoop? People like to say they sit out on their stoop in New York City. Where I grew up, we didn't have stoops. Is this a stoop? And the woman is just like, are you effing kidding me right now? Why don't you just admit what you're doing here? And they eventually, they walk away. Have a nice day. We were just admiring houses. That's all. One in particular. And anyway, so far the only thing I've seen about it that was written up in the news was from the New York Post. And of course, it's the New York Post. So they're in favor of having Ed Martin in a pervert costume outside of Letitia James's house and write it up as such. DOJ, their headline is DOJ Special Attorney Ed Martin checks out Tish James's, quote, mortgage fraud home after being tapped for probes. And if you want to blame somebody for this terrible writing, it's Miranda Devine. It is kind of insane. Department of Justice Special Attorney Ed Martin was spotted in Brooklyn Friday inspecting Tish James's multifamily residential property that is at the center of a federal mortgage fraud investigation. The problem is that everybody kind of agrees that it's an investigation that's only open because they are looking to drum up charges against Tish James to get her back for prosecuting Trump for fraud in New York 2 years ago. And by the way, they're making a very clever argument in all of this too, to the extent that the DOJ has actually brought charges and James has been able to answer them. She's been saying, this is selective prosecution. And I can show you a reason why, a million reasons why, or at least 1,500 reasons why. But of course, you all claimed, they think it's really funny and ironic to prosecute her for mortgage fraud when she had essentially already prosecuted prosecuted Trump for mortgage fraud and nailed him. She won the case. So they thought it would be funny to try to prosecute her for that. But at the same time, they also claimed, the only reason you were prosecuting Donald Trump is because you were targeting him politically. Yours was a selective prosecution. That's the violation, really. That's the much better theory, actually. The violation of Trump's civil rights. You went after him and brought him before a jury because of who he is politically, as opposed to just because you actually found that he was guilty of fraud, which, we've had the trial. Sorry, you lose. But now they're, of course, saying, that was weaponization of the DOJ. And in order to get rid of the weaponization of the DOJ, we're going to weaponize the DOJ against the people we think weaponize the DOJ against us, because two wrongs make right. That's the truth. Everybody knows how the saying goes. Two wrongs do make a right. You've all been pre-wrong about that, just like you've been wrong about the Constitution. So Letitia James, quite, correctly points out, hey, you pardoned 1,500 violent insurrectionists for January 6th, but you're prosecuting me because you think I might have filled out some forms for a mortgage incorrectly, and you have a special guy assigned from the DOJ to do this. He's busy. He's got a job. It's a dumb job. He shouldn't have the job, pardon attorney. But you're also putting him in charge of this fake division of the Department of Justice, and apparently he views this now as his job to hang out around my house. And I just want to point out, one, he's probably not alone. Two, it's probably not just this other guy in a suit and tie standing with him. There's probably agents in a car somewhere elsewhere, armed agents, keeping a close eye on him and making sure, he's not assailed in any way, if anybody actually does recognize him. But, it's been a little while, but we did have crazy weirdos dressed up as a cop assassinate Democratic lawmakers in Minnesota not that long ago. Do I think Ed Martin has a gun on him and he's really there to shoot Letitia James? No, but I am saying that it is a little weird that there were armed federal agents from the fake division of the DOJ hanging around outside Letitia James's house, and that bothers me, and it should bother you, just as so many other things that Trump is up to should be bothering you. I mentioned, though, that I went looking for other reports. There are normal outlets that have reported that Ed Martin was outside. MSN, not MSNBC, but just MSN has got something. Although, look at this. Sorry, not normal. MSN would be relatively normal, but they don't have their own reporters, do they? This is actually from the Daily Caller, so this is very much like reading the New York Post here. Is there anybody who has decided to actually cover this from a normal standpoint? I see, let's see, AOL is carrying something, but that's probably also somebody else's reports. That's too, is the Daily Caller. Too much reach for the Daily Caller, if you ask me. Anybody? No, I guess not. It's weird. There's something on YouTube about it. The only thing I can see, I don't know anything about this publication. Black Westchester. You're going to have to tell me what the story is with these guys. Well, let's see. One of their headlines is Trump and Putin meet in Alaska. Talks signal a possible turning point on Ukraine. I don't know if I can. Do I read that as conservative coded or what? I'm not really sure. Yeah, can't tell you. Anyway, but it does say here, the heat is on. Special prosecutor reportedly seen outside Letitia James's Brooklyn home. Damon K. Jones reporting for them, although he does it mostly video style. So I'm not going to be able to watching that. So I don't know if there's anybody like, in mainstream mass media who's been covering this, but I guess it'll get some coverage today and maybe we can read about it tomorrow. But I should also probably take a look around for some good write-ups reviewing the case that they think they're trying to make against Letitia James. I was in the middle of reading the Steve Vladeck piece about the supposed misconduct complaint, very much of a piece being brought against Judge Boasberg, although he was getting very weedy about it. But it was very technically adept, for sure, a real interesting dissection of just how bad and dangerous this thing was. And as I have said, and maybe I really need to go back and maybe we can spend this segment reading further into this piece, but we were just sort of getting into the real interesting parts of the weedy parts of how bad and how dangerous this thing was. And I have said a couple of times, I think it's among the most dangerous things the DOJ has been doing, but now they have competitors like planting Ed Martin outside of Letitia James's house. But you may remember we were reading the piece called DOJ's Ridiculous Misconduct Complaint Against Chief Judge Boasberg. And my argument has always been, look, this essentially stands for the proposition that it's now illegal to rule against Trump. And there are a couple other instances where there have been consequences for finding in court against Trump. Well, Letitia James winning the civil trial against him, targeting Jack Smith for pursuing criminal charges against him, and now, of course, this fake ethics complaint against Judge Boasberg for having the temerity to ask whether there was and find that there was probable cause to prosecute not Trump but his DOJ for ignoring court orders. And is that maybe contempt of court? And it's like sort of, yes, facially it is contempt of court. It's very odd that you hesitate about such things, but there it is. The bottom line is this order was issued to turn the planes around that were deporting people to El Salvador. You didn't do it. You obfuscated. You said it couldn't be done. You said it hadn't happened yet. You said the flights were going elsewhere. You said all sorts of that's out of our control. You said it was Bukele's call and it wasn't. You said you're not the ones imprisoning them. El Salvador is, but El Salvador says you are. So all of these things, it's pretty plain on its face that you violated the court order. And now I'm going to ask, do I have probable cause to maybe kind of sort of hold a DOJ attorney in contempt for telling us all these lies? Somebody has to be held in contempt for telling us all these lies and defying the court order. And we now also have this additional mountain of evidence. Well, okay, here are whistleblower testimony saying Emil Bove said, yeah, you're going to have to go tell that judge to go F himself. Well, it seems like we might have probable cause here for a contempt citation. And then the D.C. appeals court, 2-1, 2 Trump judges on the panel, 2-1, said, we actually find this to be an error. No reasoning provided because they're doing it on an emergency basis. But they're basically saying we find it's like reversible error to conclude that there's probable cause for a contempt proceeding. There's a pretty good chance you're going to get that conviction, and you're going to get that conviction based on the standard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt that there was contempt. But it's all staring you in the face. There's a really good chance of a conviction here. And you're saying it's actually reversible legal error to find probable cause to go forward with it? That's crazy. And I was saying that's at least as egregious. And I think I forgot Judge Eileen Cannon's actual first name. I think I said it was Alicia on Friday, and it's Eileen Cannon. And, for all the rulings she's made where everybody thought she's just not even a serious person. That's insane. She should be removed from the bench for these rulings. This is just as bad. Now, as we left off probably right after reading Vladek's description of what was going on here, that there were two critical pieces of context that neither the DOJ's quote complaint nor the sensationalist story in the right-wing outlet The Federalist that supposedly quote-unquote broke this episode have provided. Remember our background here. For starters, the Judicial Conference's entire meeting is not public. The Judicial Conference being the body, the administrative body for the courts. All the judges are members of the Judicial Conference. It's like their little Congress. They are a convention of judges. They get together and talk about stuff that needs to be addressed on the federal courts system. And the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court is the chair of the Judicial Conference. And they have, you might understand this to be the case, naturally, that they have some degree of confidentiality amongst themselves. And though they very often invite high-ranking DOJ folks to or senators who serve on the Judiciary Committee, people who have influence over the process by which some of these problems might be addressed, are invited with the understanding that you will respect the confidentiality of the proceedings. And Sheldon Whitehouse was the one who wrote the letter saying, I will do that. What's weird is that Pam Bondi is filing charges that make it obvious that she will not. So, again, it's not a public thing, although that's what the DOJ complaint is, that by Boasberg, by speaking out in public, is supposedly jeopardizing, undermining the integrity of both the judiciary and the executive branch, even though none of this was public. But second, DOJ's entire complaint is apparently based on a non-public memorandum prepared by one of the attendees, a member of the Judicial Conference, which itself appears to have been meant to do nothing more than provide a summary of the gathering to the attendees' judicial colleagues. That is to say, a copy of the memo apparently attached to the complaint as Appendix A was just to raise awareness among the judiciary. Are you having this problem too? Is this a widespread enough problem that I should be taking action? Do you need to take action? Tell me, back me up here. Am I right or am I wrong? And they attach it to the thing, and they said, this is prima facie evidence of an ethics complaint? Indeed, Vlad continues, the fact that the Federalist appears to have obtained that confidential memo but has not published it seems to strongly suggest, among other things, that the memo is not only entirely benign, but that it may provide even further context for Boasberg's remarks. And although it's clear from the story in the Federalist, DOJ's complaint also leaves out that the putatively inappropriate comments made by Boasberg were his efforts to convey the views of his colleagues on the district court and not his own opinions. That, too, is going to matter in these proceedings below, as they say. Now, he goes on to list this. Let's run and see what we can include before our break here. 4 fatal problems with the DOJ's complaint. Against this backdrop, it seems to me, says Stephen Vladek, that there are 4 different reasons why what Boasberg is alleged to have said doesn't come anywhere close to judicial misconduct. Both separately and together, these points leave the distinct impression that the purpose of the complaint is not to actually obtain formal discipline against Chief Judge Boasberg. They're not going to get anywhere with that, or they shouldn't under normal circumstances, but rather to intimidate other judges or otherwise spread misinformation about the lower federal courts. They're just going to use this to complain that they're hopelessly biased against Trump. How do we know? Look, one of the judges that found against him has an ethics complaint against him. And if there's an ethics complaint, it must be unethical to find against Trump. That's some weird and wild bootstrapping, to say the least, of conclusory, of this conclusion. Well, you can see the guy's under investigation. He must have done something wrong. It doesn't work like that. Well, we'll squeeze in the first one. First and foremost, obviously, their comments weren't public. One of the canons of the Code of Conduct for the United States judges that the DOJ claims Boasberg violated is that this should not be making public comments, these judges, but none of them were public. I think we're done. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's stay in the weeds with Steve Vlad just to read some more, just so you know how egregious this stupid complaint against Judge Boasberg is. I know it's passing us by in time and other things are happening, but as I keep trying to impress them on you, and I think it's working to some extent, by boring you with these details, just how dangerous this is. And I think it's a good point. He's trying to point out here that it should be inherently dangerous to be bringing charges that you really have probably no hope of getting a conviction on. It's actually, contrary to the standard procedures for the Department of Justice. If you're pretty sure that you're just not on strong enough ground for something like this, you don't bring it, and you don't bring charges just to intimidate and rattle people, especially if it's a federal judge. Anyway, as we pointed out here, or as he was getting pretty weedy here, he was bringing up part of the judicial canons, the Code of Conduct for United States Judges. Canon 3A6 is the one at issue here. That provision states that, quote, a judge should not make public comments on the merits of a matter pending or impending in any court. Suffice to say, DOJ never explains how a private comment at a private meeting that was made public only because a confidential memorandum memorializing the meeting was leaked, how could that possibly violate Canon 3A6? Make no public comment about this. I didn't. Yeah, but people know about it. Yeah, that's because you guys stole it and published it. Yeah, well, now it's public. Yeah, but that's you. You did it. Yeah, but you wrote it. Yeah, but it was... You see where we're going here? Well, the best it can offer, DOJ, is that the claim that because the memorandum has become public, the comments they memorialize were illegitimate. But that's true of anything a federal judge says in private. On that reading, a federal judge would violate the canon simply by discussing a pending case with a clerk or colleague, because that discussion might one day be made public. Or even less logically, the violation occurs only when someone else publicizes the judge's private comments. To ask whether that's a fair reading of Canon 3A6 is to answer it. One might also note that the comments were not on the merits of a matter pending or impending in any court, but rather a broader concern about governmental behavior across cases. But there's only so much time in the day. We'll move on then to the second of the four fatal objections here. Second, whereas DOJ characterizes Boasberg's comments as pushing a wholly unsolicited discussion and attempting to transform a routine housekeeping agenda into a forum to persuade the Chief Justice and other federal judges of his preconceived belief that the Trump administration would violate court orders, these appear to be radical mischaracterizations of what actually happened, like the repeated instance in the complaint that Boasberg's comments were public. They're just lying about it and mischaracterizing the whole thing, not unlike the Mueller report being mischaracterized in the executive summary that Bill Barr published. Not our good Bill Barr, but the other bad Bill Barr. Going off the Federalist report alone, it appears that Boasberg was simply doing his job, relaying concerns raised by his colleagues to the Chief Justice. Now, he also shared these concerns. They were violating the orders that he had issued, Judge Boasberg. But remember that Judge Boasberg is also the chief judge of the D.C. District Federal Courts, the trial courts in D.C. And as such, other judges in the D.C. trial courts also were finding the same thing and shared the same concern. And in his capacity as chief judge, they said, hey, we're also having that problem. We think you should bring it up with the Chief Justice since you're going on our behalf to the judicial conference later on. You should mention to the Chief Justice that the trial courts in D.C. are, in many instances, finding this to be the case. Please bring this up. So he did it. And he was able to say, I also have the same concern because it's happening in my court. So, right. So he was doing his job here, relaying the concerns of others as well as his own concerns. Now, not only is there nothing nefarious there, the central role of the district court representatives on the judicial conference is to act as a conduit between the dozens of district judges in their court and the federal judiciary's policymaking arm writ large. That's the conference. If Boasberg was accurately relaying his colleagues' concerns, and in all of this, no one has alleged that he wasn't accurate, then he was doing his job by saying what he said. An ethics complaint for doing your job? What? Third, although DOJ's unsworn complaint insists that the Trump administration has complied with every court order, that's quite obviously not true. One of the most visible examples came in a case before Chief Judge Boasberg himself, where Boasberg has filed an exhaustive 46-page opinion finding probable cause to conclude that DOJ lawyers and other government officials acted in willful disregard of a temporary restraining order when they removed more than 150 Venezuelan nationals to El Salvador on the night of March 15th, 2025. Other examples abound. If a federal judge at the judicial conference were making representations to the Chief Justice and other judges in attendance that reflected unsupportable bias against a party, that'd be one thing. But when this entire episode is based upon Chief Judge Boasberg raising his colleagues' concern about what would happen if the government generally failed to comply with court orders versus not complying in specific cases, and the government has since failed to comply with many court orders, again, it seems like what Boasberg was doing is exactly what he should have been doing. Fourth, and finally, even if the comments had been public, even if the comments reflected Boasberg's views rather than a summary of his colleagues' concerns, and even if those concerns weren't well taken, it's still not clear to me where there would be a violation of the code of conduct for United States judges here. Boasberg did not say that he or his colleagues was predisposed to rule against the government in any specific case. He did not say that he or his colleagues believes any of the specific government policies being challenged in any of these cases are unlawful. And he did not say that he or his colleagues have any preformed views about how they were going to rule in particular disputes. The breathless piece in The Federalist nevertheless asserts that the real problem with Boasberg's comments is that they demonstrate a violation of the presumption of regularity. Do you remember when we mentioned that? And when we mentioned it, it was a complaint from judges that we think the DOJ is violating and does not deserve that presumption of regularity, and that could just make everything collapse, essentially. Now there's just no point in proceeding in courts of law if you can just lie about everything, make stuff up, and just regularly violate the presumption of regularity. So what are they doing? Every accusation is a confession. Every Republican accusation is a confession. Once you're found to be in violation of the presumption of regularity, you must immediately, the playbook says, accuse the judges who said that you're no longer entitled to the presumption of regularity. Accuse the judges of violating the presumption of regularity. Perfect. Sure, so that's what's happening. The breathless piece in The Federalist asserts that the real problem with Boasberg is that it demonstrates a violation of the presumption of regularity, the idea that all things being equal, courts should assume that the government turns square corners. But not only is that presumption rebuttable, I mean, it is only a presumption after all, strong presumption, but it is a rebuttable one, including in light of the government's own behavior. But not only that, but DOJ's only evidence that the presumption wasn't followed is the litigation in the JGG, that's the name of the defendant there, or the deportee involved. The JGG, actually he's not the defendant because they were the ones bringing the case against the federal government, but the JGG Alien Enemy Act case. I just was explaining why JGG, they're using the initials of the deportees rather than identifying them by their full names when they sue the federal government for violations of their civil rights. Okay, so where were we here? The government's, the DOJ's only evidence that the presumption of regularity wasn't followed is the litigation in this one particular Alien Enemy Act case, where Boasberg proceeded methodically and by the book in building a record of DOJ's misbehavior and giving the government every opportunity to comply, and when they didn't, to get back in compliance, bending over backwards. That's why I spent so much time stressing it the first time we started reading this thing. All he's done here is meticulously documented that it would be okay to say that there is probable cause to believe that at a full trial weighing all of the evidence, you would have a reasonable chance at convicting someone of contempt of court. But that's all we're saying. There's probably cause to believe that. And this ridiculous appeals court says, no, reversible error of law. There's no possibility that finding probable cause to move forward is legally supportable. That's insane. It's just alien canon writ large. So, once again, it's the only evidence that the presumption wasn't followed is this one litigation, this one Alien Enemy Act case, where Boasberg proceeded so carefully and where the ground on which the Supreme Court ultimately disagreed with Boasberg involved a technical jurisdictional question about how challenges to Alien Enemy Act removals should be filed. Remember what forum they should be? File your habeas petition in the district where you're being held. That was a 5-4 Supreme Court majority, which made new law, by the way, not to be anticipated, not necessarily should be expected to be anticipated by Boasberg. And again, none of that comes anywhere close to the kind of misconduct for which Congress enacted the Judicial and Disability Act of 1980, I guess, encapsulating the Code of Conduct for the judges. In other words, there was nothing about the way the Supreme Court decided one narrow technical issue of that case that puts Boasberg on wrong footing. It just doesn't work that way. Nor is the complaint on any stronger footing when it tries over and over again to impute some kind of nefarious intent to Chief Judge Boasberg. Again, I used the term bootstrapping before, such as claiming that he, quote, attempted to improperly influence Chief Justice Roberts, that he was, quote, trying to entrap the Chief Justice, and that his comments reflected, quote, an apparent attempt to persuade the members of the conference to adopt his erroneous view. Leaving aside the factual misrepresentations in the complaint, such as that Boasberg's comments were unsolicited, remember, it's his job to pass them on, it's worth returning to what this was all about. Boasberg telling other members of the Judicial Conference that some of his colleagues were concerned about the possibility that the Trump administration might not comply with some of their orders in unnamed and unspecified cases. Even if there's room for disagreement about how legitimate a concern that may have been, there's just nothing in the Code of Conduct that comes anywhere close to preventing a member of the Judicial Conference from raising it therein. The DOJ's real endgame, speculated upon next, as the above analysis suggests, this so-called complaint, it's in quotes, complaint against Chief Judge Boasberg, has virtually no chance of succeeding. In ordinary times, I have to imagine that D.C. Circuit Chief Judge Sri Srinivasan would just dismiss such a complaint out of hand. Given the politics, it's possible that he'll go out of his way, this is exactly as I said it, go out of his way to dot the I's and cross the T's here by referring it to a panel of judges for resolution under the terms of the Judicial Conduct and Disability Act. But even that move would just postpone the inevitable. Chief Judge Boasberg did nothing wrong, and the members of the D.C. Circuit Judicial Council are not about to conclude otherwise. If that's true, then the question becomes why DOJ is doing this. And I got to pause here again and remind you, this is from late July, this article, and he states with relative certainty what should be happening under normal circumstances. There's no grounds whatsoever for this complaint to go forward. But at the same time, it now has grounds because they're bootstrapping those and they're creating those grounds by handing, well, the appeals panel that's currently sitting is, like I said, 2 Trump appointees and a Biden appointee. And they are, in several instances, this and another one just recently, voting 2-1 in favor of adopting these ludicrous pro-Trump positions that just simply, like everything else, stand for the proposition that you just can't rule against Trump. There was another one, and I don't have it at my fingertips, but I'll see if I can dig it up. It's not related directly to this case, but it is the same panel doing the same thing. We don't have any reason for it. You just can't rule against Trump. And now they're throwing out the probable cause finding. And I guess now they'll now go back to court with this complaint and say, well, you say it was a reasonable thing to do to pass on this complaint. But let me ask you this. If it was so reasonable, would a panel of the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals have thrown out the probable cause finding? I mean, the only conclusion you can draw from that is that there wasn't really probable cause for holding any DOJ attorneys in contempt, and yet he wanted to pursue it. Isn't that in itself obvious evidence of bias? Now, it could be that he's wrong and he's reversed, but you're not supposed to turn that into an ethics complaint. He was wrong, he was reversed, and as long as he doesn't seek to enforce contempt despite having the probable cause finding thrown out, then he's not in violation of anything. But if they say, well, just proposing it and being wrong, and not even really being wrong, just being reversed based on no reasoning by a partisan panel. And what's happening here is, of course, 2 Trump judges and a Biden judge, they get together 2-1 and say, well, we don't have any real reasoning for it, but if we find against Boasberg, then we can point to a finding of the court. We're occupying these seats. We are the court. We say he's wrong about this. And if we decide that it also evidences bias, then I guess it does, even though it can't possibly. How could it? Anyway, so where we left off here, Chief Boasberg did nothing wrong, and the members of the D.C. Circuit Judicial Council are not about to conclude otherwise, but they're going to be handed this evidence that a panel of the D.C. Circuit found that there was no probable cause, and they will bootstrap that into, and so therefore he must have been biased to have come to that conclusion, and they'll take that to the D.C. Circuit Judicial Council and say there's an ethics problem here. Now, if it's true, as Vlad says, that the D.C. Circuit Judicial Council is probably not going to conclude that there was anything even remotely approaching an ethics violation, then the question becomes why DOJ is doing this and why Attorney General Bondi decided to make such a public spectacle out of a, to my mind, frivolous complaint against a highly respected federal district judge. Given what I know about Chief Judge Boasberg, who is not the type of jurist to give in to this kind of pressure, it seems to me that there are two obvious audiences for such a move. The first is the other district judges, including those perhaps without the reputation and stature and backbone of Chief Judge Boasberg. Even frivolous misconduct, judicial misconduct complaints come at a cost, especially when they're filed not by private litigants, but by the U.S. Department of Justice. If the chief judge of the D.C. District Court can come in for such treatment for doing nothing more than conveying his colleagues' concerns to the Chief Justice at a meeting at which that's his job, perhaps other judges will think twice the next time they want to publicly reprimand the government or otherwise say anything that could be construed in any way as reflecting comparable concerns about the behavior of the current Department of Justice. That'd be a shame. The separation of powers is supposed to be a two-way street, and the notion that judges are powerless to identify systemic problems in the courts over which they preside is not only belied by 236 years of federal judicial practice, but it would also render the judicial branch even more dependent on the democratically elected branches of government. The second audience is the president's supporters, who are being fed a steady stream of deeply misleading accounts of how litigation against Trump administration policies is unfolding. From that perspective, a handful of biased Democratic-appointed district judges have been entirely responsible for lawless rulings thwarting the president's policy goals, and they've been put back in their place time and again by the Supreme Court. Of course, that narrative is preposterous. I've explained, he says, and links it here, in detail how even the government's remarkably positive track record in the Supreme Court is coming, one, from lower court rulings by an ideologically diverse set of lower court judges, two, in a small minority of the total cases challenging Trump administration policies, and three, in many cases with no substantive endorsement of what the government is actually doing. But for folks who don't get a lot of nuance with their news, reports about a formal misconduct complaint against one of the district judges who has been at the center of one of the most visible disputes, and without any of the relevant context, can serve only to fan the flames. The fact of the matter is that over the first 6 months of the second Trump administration, federal district courts have been the principal check on lawlessness by the executive branch, and even when those courts have gotten things, quote, wrong, their behavior has been, in virtually every case, consistent with the highest standards of the profession. That's a problem for the Trump administration, one that it can't solve simply by seeking emergency relief from the Supreme Court. But just to put an extra emphasis on this, right? Even when the courts have gotten things, quote, wrong, they've been reversed by higher courts, they haven't gone back and said, "Nuh-uh, I'm not listening to that." They've said, my hands are tied. We're going to have to comply with the finding of the higher court, at least temporarily, unless that gets reversed later. If it's the Supreme Court, obviously there's nothing we can do about it. They comply. They follow the rules. But they're at a disadvantage because the DOJ isn't following any of the rules. They're not following court orders, and anybody who says that they're not following court orders, they file charges against. And that gets to the last and most troubling point about all of this. In her tweet on Monday, and this again was back in July, Bondi wrote that Boasberg's comments, quote, have undermined the integrity of the judiciary, and we will not stand for that. Now, she's not in the judiciary, mind you. In fact, the only thing undermining the integrity of the judiciary here is the Department of Justice filing a patently baseless and profoundly misleading misconduct complaint against a federal judge who did nothing more than diligently discharge his duties. Whatever the motive for the complaint, it seems quite clear that the government, at the very least, knows that its behavior will further erode public support and respect for federal district judges. Indeed, given how the episode is being covered thus far, not just by right-wing media, but by even by more responsible outlets, that erosion may already be happening. In that respect, it seems especially important for folks to be rallying to the defense, not just of Chief Judge Boasberg specifically, but of the lower federal courts in general. Part of that includes conveying the factual and analytical bankruptcy of DOJ's misconduct complaint. That's why we're reading this weedy stuff to you here. I mean, in the main, all you're hearing is ethics complaint against federal judge. Oh, that seems bad. DOJ brought it. Well, that must be serious. Not this DOJ, but anyway, now you know the details of it. Part of this includes conveying that factual and analytical bankruptcy of the DOJ's misconduct complaint, as this post has attempted to do. But part of it is more generally reminding everyone who will listen that federal judges are not robot umpires calling balls and strikes. Part of their job is not just to decide the cases before them, but to also raise institutional concerns about the functioning of the legal system to those in a position to hear and act upon them. Federal judges should be encouraged to identify systemic issues affecting their ability to do their jobs, even if not especially when those systemic issues involve the behavior of the current administration. Folks like me can try to provide the missing context so that informed citizens can make their own assessment of the situation, but it's also incumbent upon those in a position to speak authoritatively to the proper role of federal judges vis-a-vis the judicial conference to actually do so, and the person perhaps best situated to make that point in the person to whom Boasberg's comments were initially directed, and the judicial conference is the presiding officer, the Chief Justice of the United States. Got it. Made it to the end. It's a lot of detail, some weedy detail. It reminds me, though, of another sort of weird bootstrapping spin story going on. I mentioned this earlier when Greg mentioned the Daily Mail coming up. News story that developed over the weekend involved everybody's favorite drag performer, Kristi Noem, who at the moment is in the middle of a controversy reported here by the Washington Post in the headline. Kristi Noem is living rent-free, not in your head, but in a home used by, usually, the Coast Guard commandant. A DHS spokeswoman said Noem must live on the military base in this housing they usually set aside for the commandant of the Coast Guard because she has been, quote, so horribly doxxed and targeted that she is no longer able to safely live in her own apartment. Now, what's going on here, and why does it involve the Daily Mail? The Washington Post story, I wish I had time to read it in its entirety so that you could find out what's not in it. But the story here is, once again, another Trump administration official is living in military housing that's supposed to be set aside for a high-ranking military officer, an admiral of the Coast Guard, the commandant of the Coast Guard. And not only living there instead of that admiral, but living there rent-free. Now, there are a couple of times in which some cabinet members, Hegseth, for instance, lives in military housing, but he pays rent for it. I don't know whether he's paying fair market value or not. Supposed to. Kristi Noem not paying rent, and it's a fabulous home by all accounts. And what's really weird, though, is she says, well, I have to live here because of security, because I've been doxxed, horribly doxxed and targeted. What does she mean? Well, there was some publication of photos of the neighborhood in which she's living. She lives in the Navy Yard area, but in, private off-base housing. Now she lives inside Joint Base Bowling, is it? Anyway, the The issue is, she says, I'm being doxxed. Who's doxing her? They don't really discuss it. Although there is, I think, finally a mention in the updated version of the Washington Post story, which says that it's the Daily Mail that was publishing these photos of her neighborhood. Now, why is the Daily Mail publishing photos of her neighborhood? They never really get to that. Only the thing is this. I'll make it long story short. The reason they were publishing the photos is that Kristi Noem has, for a long time, we've known this, we've mentioned it on the show before, been said to be conducting an affair, of all people, with Corey Lewandowski. Now, we can't really understand, there's no accounting for taste in all of this. And I don't attempt to. Except, blah, gross. But anyway, and also danger, girl. Anyway, presumably she has security that will, I guess they'll arrest Corey Lewandowski if he beats her up. I don't know. I'm not really sure about that. Anyway, the point is, these two have been carrying on an affair, it is alleged, for some time now, and they had set themselves up very slyly, apparently, the Daily Mail found out, in apartments directly across the street from one another. Very posh apartments, but not nearly as posh as the $20,000 pad that Corey Mills was using. But anyway, that's what they were doing, and it was, to facilitate them carrying on their affair, which, fine, I guess, except that, it's the danger of corruption and blackmail, etc., etc. So anyway, they were publishing these photos because it was photos of the two of them entering their various buildings and then crossing the street to see one another every once in a while, I guess, and they were pursuing a relatively legitimate story here. She's turned that into, well, no, they're doxing me and they're creating a hazard to my safety, and so therefore I have to kick the, I guess now acting commandant of the Coast Guard out of this housing. Now, you may remember that the Trump administration fired the sitting commandant of the Coast Guard very early in this administration, gave her 3 hours to vacate the home, too. And then, I don't know, it was vacant, so I moved in.
RedWoodsRadio.com.
Oh, well.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Anyway, just found that interesting that they were sort of bootstrapping this coverage into, now it's doxing, it's an attack on me, in ways that somehow posting someone outside of Letitia James's house is not, I guess. Anyway, we'll be back with more tomorrow. Now you need to stay tuned for Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next, right here on Netroots Radio.